As it says on the shipping carton, this model is from Heavy Haul Replicas. It says on the box that it's fragile, and only the small label tells you this is model number 129D-4. Let's check the shipping weight, and it's just over £1. What is 470 grams? It says do not use blades to open, but if you think you can see a blade being used, surely that must be a figment of your imagination. Because here on Cranes etc. we always do what we're told. With the outer shipping carton open, we can get out the box that's inside, and here you can see it is Mack branded. And on the underneath there's confirmation of Heavy Haul Replicas, and there's another repeat of the tiny identifying label. At this point in a review we usually open the box to see what's inside, and this one is absolutely no exception. There are no surprises to see what comes out. It's a pair of expanded polystyrene trays and they are taped together. So once again we will not use a blade to get it open. Lifting the top tray and we get our first sight of the model, and it's a Mack RD800. And it's in a green over black colour scheme. There's no information about the model or the real truck, but a nice inclusion is a set of spare door mirrors, and there's also a plastic pointer tool. There is a little bit more packaging to very carefully remove, and the first bit protects the cab doors, and you have to be really careful cutting the second bit, because as you can see it would be oh so easy to cut the plastic lines that are underneath. But luckily, with all the skill of a brain surgeon, we can get the tape cut and removed. Still not done though, because there's more tape protecting the winch. And it's another opportunity to cut something that you shouldn't. But success comes with a steady hand and an absence of drink. Once the packaging is removed, there's no assembly to do because the model is complete out of the box. And if we drive it to the weighbridge, we see that the model weighs just about 8 ounces, or 225 grams. We start underneath and immediately see this is a detailed model. The front leaf springs are represented, and you can see the underside of the engine and the gearbox. There are fuel tanks on each side, and the drive shaft runs to the axles at the rear, and they have detailed differentials and suspension. There are soft mud flaps, and the tyres have a detailed tread pattern. At the front, this Mack has a silver bulldog mascot, and both the Mack name and the mesh grille look really good. There's a heavy front bumper assembly, but there's no number plate because this is a generic model. And the headlights look realistic too, together with an oversized load sign. The Mack name appears on the side of the hood, and there are tie-downs modelled. There are textured surfaces on the top of the wheel arch, and although the tyres have no branding, the plastic wheels are detailed. The windscreen wipers are very fine for the scale, and on the roof of the cab there are lights and air horns. And if you want to see an incredible detail, the Mack name appears inside the air horns. There are nice chromed grab rails outside the cab, and the tiny door handle looks really good too. Textured steps lead up, and the step inside the fuel tank looks particularly good. There's a beacon light on top of the roof and a very nice mesh grille behind. There's also a pair of spotlights. There's a large chromed exhaust with a decent looking hole at the top. And this model also has a winch. It has a kind of steel coloured rope and there's a tiny hook at the end. Either side of the fifth wheel are more textured wheel arches, and the rear wheels are detailed too. Moving to the back, there are a couple of lights with lenses, and there are Mack logos on the mud flaps. Going back underneath, the rear wheels spin freely, and the front wheels do too. There's very good slightly notched steering, and at the extreme the tyres touch the mud flaps. Also a nicely modelled feature is the suspension, and you can see the rear axles float together, and there's suspension at the front too. In action, this Mack rolls along very well, and if we set the steering to the maximum, then the front wheels lock against the mud flaps, but ease the steering off a bit and it all rolls very well again. And whilst we have the truck right side up, let's test the suspension again, and it certainly does rock and roll. Using the included plastic tool, we can open the sides of the engine hood, and as a bonus there's a tiny prop inside, and you can carefully move that into position to keep the hood open. With that done, we can have a good look at the engine inside, and as you can see, it's made up of a number of different components. For completeness, we'll take a quick look around the other side, and again we can see all of the engine detailing. The cab door is open, but the fit of the doors is so good even the tool doesn't really help. So what you can do is very carefully use the mirror to open the door. That then gives you access to another feature on the model, and that is that the seats have an air ride function so they can bounce up and down. And in reality, who doesn't like to bounce up and down? The detailing inside the cab is also of a very high standard. Moving behind the cab, and this model features a working winch, and you can carefully pull the rope off it. There's no friction on the winch, so basically it spins freely. And to wind the rope back in, you need to carefully use your thumb. And all this assumes your fingers and thumbs are not salami sized. The fifth wheel features a working latch, and it also pivots and moves longitudinally. Let's try the Mack with a trailer, and in this case we're using an old Sword Freightliner tipper. The kingpin is not fat, so it fits the fifth wheel on the Mack very well, and the only very slight issue is that the Mack fifth wheel sits higher than a Sword fifth wheel. So the front axle is not quite grounded, but movement at the fifth wheel is really good. This is another very high quality model by Heavy Haul Replicas. It has an excellent array of functionality and moving parts, and it poses really well with a suitable trailer. Another high point of the model is the very high standard of detailing. So if you want a really good Mack truck model, this one is excellent.